Welcome to Mediocre Gaming, and today we're talking about Stadia. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and salutations. Today, is it the future of gaming? Let's get to it. Google came out yesterday at the GDC and talked about their new gaming platform called Stadia. Now they're trying to get into the hands and pockets of developers, game players, and game viewers. So all facets of the gaming industry, they're trying to get in touch with or have some sort of contact with. As I showed in the demo, you can easily switch or use a phone, a tablet, a Chromebook, a laptop, or PC, or a TV with a Chromecast attachment. The plus side is that there is no download time because it is all streaming. It is a streaming platform. So everything comes in from the Google data centers, which are all over the world, and it goes straight to you. As such, there is no box. Now, traditionally, you've had to buy a console or a PC that can handle those kinds of things. So, like the PS4 or PS4 Pro, the Xbox One or Xbox One X, Nintendo Switch, what have you. Now, with the PC, of course, that was kind of the preferred method of gaming for a lot of people because that had the ability to kind of brute force its way into higher resolutions and higher frame rates versus consoles, which had very strict limitations. Now, since there is no console, there is no PC per se, you don't have that technical requirement. So instead of spending a whole bunch of money on a piece of equipment, you're just going to play completely through the data center. They are putting out a Stadia controller, which is a Wi-Fi controller, which goes and connects with your internet and then connects to the data center. So whatever device that you're using, it'll go to that device. So whether it is your TV or laptop or PC. Now, your current controllers, if you have an Xbox One or a PS4, you can use those controllers on the laptop or PC as your controller if you don't want the Stadia controller. Now, you will lose some of the functionality of the controller. The controller does have a capture, and it also has a Google Assistant button. Now, each Stadia instance uses a specialized AMD processing unit capable of 10.7 teraflops per second versus the PS4 at 4.2 teraflops and the Xbox One at 6.0. Now, as we all know, the next iteration of the Xbox and the PlayStation are already in the works. Although we don't know the specs, they are certainly going to be higher than what they currently are for the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro. Whether it will be at this 10.7 teraflops per second or lower or higher, we won't know until the specifications are released to the public. Now, because Google has data centers all over the world, you're talking about less latency because you're going to have a server somewhere close to you. Now, when they started the beta program for Project Stream back in October of 2018, you were able to get 1080p up to 60 frames per second and stereo sound. Now, when it is going to be released publicly as Stadia, you're looking at 4K resolution, 60 FPS, and surround sound. So that is a much higher standard than 1080p with stereo sound. And there's going to be expansion potential for up to 8K at 120 frames per second. Highly impressive. Now they're using the Vulkan API, which has a low overhead. It was kind of considered the OpenGL Plus, or the next iteration of OpenGL, which evenly distributes work between the graphic processing unit and the CPU. It is supported by both AMD and NVIDIA, which are of course the two huge graphic card makers for PCs. It is also supported by Unity and Unreal, among others, and Stadia is going to take advantage of that by using Vulkan AMD processors, and developers can either use Unity or the Unreal Engine to develop games for this system. Now, unlike consoles, they are going to be able to scale, so developers potentially have no limitations as far as what they want to do and how they want to do it, as long as they are using the Vulkan API and Unity or Unreal. So for graphically intense and animation intense games, they can be scaled from 1 processor to multiple processors, and they showed this off at the GDC, where having one processor, you're going to be limited up to a certain point, even talking about that 10.7 teraflops per second. Getting more detail, more realism is going to require multiple processors. Now looking at multiplayer, it's always on the Google servers. So instead of going through a lot of middlemen, a lot of intermediaries, you're going straight from your house to your ISP and then directly to the Google servers with nothing in between. So that, in theory, will give you the best connection, the best latency, and the best multiplayer experience, because multiplayer experience is normally only as good as the worst connection on that particular server. So when you're thinking about people that are lagging, people either intentionally or unintentionally, people that are jumping around, that supposedly will be phased out with Stadia. Now, as a result of being completely on Google servers, they'll be able to support, developers will be able to create games with thousands of players in an instance instead of 100 players in the Battle Royale that is currently very popular. They are going to support cross-platform play. So if you have a Stadia and you want to play with someone that is on the Switch or the Xbox, then or the computer, then you should be able to do so as long as Xbox and Nintendo are cool with it. And I think we all know how Sony feels about cross-platform currently. Will they change their attitude in the future? We don't know. Now, Stadia will also have some way of pulling game saves from other platforms. So you're playing on your PlayStation, playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you get to a certain point, you go over to your Stadia, and you should be able to pick up from that point. Stadia is going to have a Stream Connect option, and this is a couch co-op type of play, along with others. Let's talk about that. So couch co-op, you've generally seen a general decline in couch co-op because of the demands of the games for each split screen. So games like GoldenEye back on the N64, they were able to have up to 4 players playing on the screen, and at the time most people had about a 27-inch screen, so you're talking about a very small section of the screen, being able to see what you're doing and what's going on in the screen. As games got more complicated, split screen became relegated to more simple games where it was less intensive on the processor. Now with Stadia, you can have multiple players playing on this same device, whether it's a TV or PC or whatever, because each screen is an instance in the Stadia server. So whether that is a single GPU or multiple GPUs within the server, each screen will be utilizing that amount of resource from the data center. So instead of being on your PC or on your PlayStation or Xbox, it's being streamed in. Of course, the downside of that is that you're having double the bandwidth requirements as you add each screen. One of the other advantages of the Stream Connect is that you can look at other players' screens. So whether there is an interaction with an object within the game world where you can look to see what other people are doing, or whether it is an option of the developers that they want you to be able to see what the other players are doing. So you rely both on audio cues while you're talking to other people on your team, but you can also see what they're doing because you can see their screen. So even though they were behind you, but all of a sudden they peel off because they saw movement to the right side or what have you, then you'll be able to know by looking at your screen, and if they don't tell you, you'll still be able to visually see it. So a lot of potential for that. Now for developers, they have what they're calling Style Transfer ML. So the art style, it'll make it easier to kind of paint the world and stylize it however they want, based on a rather complex algorithm that takes objects, either a piece of art, color palette, or what have you, and put that into the game. And they've already tested it through hundreds of types of art to create different versions of the game. So having a game with day-night cycles will be easier because you can have different art pieces that represent what an area would look like at certain times of the day. Now for the gamers, they have state share. So you are going to be able to create a link, and it has information in that. So when you save it, it'll show like what your inventory is, what is going on in the game world around you, and where you're at in the game. So things like sports game, racing game, fighting game, first-person shooter, adventure game, where you get through a level really quickly, or you get a really good score, or you were down and you were almost out of it, you were out of medkits and you were at 10% health and you were surrounded, but you were managed to pull it out and win. And you can share that moment with everyone else, or just with your friends, or whoever you want, and they can attempt the same thing. So by clicking on that link, that'll put you into that particular game at that moment in time where you were under the same conditions as the person that posted it. So you're surrounded, you're almost dead, no medkits, you're in dire straits. Can you do the same thing? Can you pull it out and win? So there's a lot of potential there. Now, additionally, this allows for ways to interact more deeply with streamers. When you're watching a streamer and they're playing a game that you enjoy, there will be a link or a potential link to get into the lobby to play with that streamer. So instead of booting up your computer, turning on your console, and getting into the lobby and just crossing your fingers and hoping to get matched with that particular streamer, instead of doing that, you can click link and go into a lobby, be put in a queue, and then get into the game and be able to play. So the level of interaction between streamers and players will deepen with that option. Now, what about if you get into a level, and how many times does this happen? You get into a level where you get into a position where you're trying to do something, trying to find something, trying to get to the next level, and you run into a wall and you don't know what to do. The Stadia controller and the Google Assistant button is there to help. There's a microphone on the controller. You hit the button, you say, how do I finish this puzzle? How do I finish this level? And the Google Assistant will pull up the top searches or top search for that particular thing based on what game you're playing and how the game looks where you are at. So the Google Assistant will look for videos that have those conditions. So they're going to look for something that has that level, that game, and automatically put you where you need to be in the video so that you can watch the most pertinent information and then move on. You don't have to switch your device. So whether you're playing on tablet, phone, TV, PC, you don't have to minimize. You don't have to stop what you're doing. You don't have to have a second device. You just do it all on that one device. Now, in addition to all of that, Google is doubling down on the platform by creating Stadia Games and Entertainment. This will be in charge of creating first-party titles for the Stadia platform. So not only are they going to have the ability of having developers outside of Stadia create games for Stadia, but they will also have in-house game development. Now, this is all very exciting. Now, what about the downsides? Well, you have to have a device. Well, I think most people have at least a phone. I haven't seen many people with a flip phone. So minimally, people will have a phone, and then you will most likely need to get the Stadia controller. The price of the Stadia controller and the price of the Stadia service is unknown. The Stadia controller looks a lot like you took a PS4 controller and an Xbox controller, mashed them up, and that's what you got as a result. Now, whether that controller is $50 or $100, thinking about the technology that goes into it, a PS4 controller is about $60. Xbox controller is about the same. So I would imagine that the Stadia controller, being Wi-Fi, would be between $50 and $100. Now, they did not mention what the price of the service will be. Much like PS Plus or Xbox Live Gold, most likely you will have to pay a monthly service fee to use Stadia. Now, whether you have to pay $10 a month, $20 a month, $40 a month, we don't know. And until we get closer to the actual launch of Stadia, we won't know. Now, I imagine that both to be competitive and to be appealing, that the service will cost between $10 and $40 per month. Now that is only to have access to Stadia. That is not having access to games on Stadia. Now, would they have a service where you can pay a flat amount per month and you have access to all games on Stadia? That's a good question. You have services like PS Now, which do not have current games, but do have a large library of games that you can pay per month, and you have access to all those games. You have EA Access, which gives you access to all current and future games on the EA library for a set amount per month. So there is potential there to see that type of service, but again, we won't know until we get closer to the actual launch of Stadia. Connection speed. You have to have a stable connection speed, and at 1080p running 30 to 60 frames per second stereo sound, you're looking at approximately 25 Mbps download speed. This is a recommendation, 25 Mbps download speed, and it needs to be stable, so you can't dip below 25 Mbps, otherwise it's not going to work. Now at 1080p, you're talking about 2 million pixels on the screen, which are being refreshed up to 60 times per second. Now when they launch, they're going to support 4K, which is 4 times as many pixels, 8,294,400 pixels, and surround sound instead of stereo sound. So instead of 2 feeds of audio, you're talking about 5.1 or 7.1 for surround sound. And supporting up to 8K, you're talking about 16 times more pixels than 1080p, or 33,177,600 pixels on the screen, being refreshed up to 120 times per second. So with each step up in resolution, in fidelity, in terms of audio sound, you're talking about increasing the minimum requirements needed for your internet connection. So instead of 25 Mbps, it might be recommended that you have 50 Mbps, 75 Mbps, or what have you. And unlike streaming services like Netflix, where the information is only going one direction, you have information going both directions. So there is an upload and download requirement, although mostly download. Most of the information will be coming down. You're only going to have the inputs from the controller going up. Now, if your internet speeds do fluctuate, you're going to have an uneven experience. So things like cutscenes, which would normally be very stable, extremely stable on consoles or PC, there's a potential for that to break down because you're talking about a large amount of information coming in, streaming in, and if your internet connection fluctuates, all of a sudden you're going to start getting pixelation of the graphics, the animation, not to mention when you're playing the game multiplayer, you have some latency lag because that internet connection is not being stable. Now, if you have a power outage or internet outage, you're dead in the water. You can't play. Now, for online only games, you have to have an internet connection anyway. But then there's other games where you can play offline. So there is, for instance, Red Dead Online, but there's also Red Dead Redemption Offline. You can play the campaign if you have an internet outage. Now, they said there's no cheating or hacking because the internet connection has no middlemen and it's going directly from your house to your ISP to the data center. So cheating and hacking should be eliminated. I would say that people are very creative and imaginative, and they will find a way to make it easier for themselves to win at a game. I would be remiss if I didn't mention some of the abandoned projects that Google's had in the past, including Google+, Hangouts, Google Glass, Goog.le, URL shortener, Inbox, etc. There is a long list of projects that Google has abandoned. They supported for whatever amount of time, and then they said, we're not going to do this anymore. Stop their support, and it's no longer available. With Stadia, if they decide to pull their support, you would be out of luck. All that progression that you've done, everything that you've put into a game or games will be lost, completely gone, and you'll no longer have access to any of it. Now, although they have said that the data centers, which are worldwide, which are over 200 countries, will have this support, so you'll be close to a server and you'll be able to play. Now, how much of these data centers will be dedicated for Stadia? Because Stadia requirements are presumably much higher than a data store. So how much of each server, how much of each data center will be dedicated for Stadia service and how much will not? So the amount of, or the ability for them to stream games is going to be entirely dependent on how many Stadia instances or how many GPUs they have in each data center. Will it be adequate enough for the constant demand of gamers and gaming? So not only are you talking about people sharing their moments, people playing for the first time, and everything else. And what about new releases? Any new game, AAA title that has a lot of hype, has a lot of interest in it, there's going to be a lot of people that are interested in playing as soon as it is released. So let's say tonight at midnight, the Stadia servers are going to release the new game. Exciting new release, everyone wants to play, or a large chunk of the gaming population wants to play, and they want to play right away. Well, at midnight, whatever time zone, if they are able to play at midnight, all of a sudden there is going to be a surge of people trying to stream their game. How is that going to affect the latency, the lag, the availability of Stadia to stream that new game? So if you have a new game and you have problems because everyone wants to play it and there isn't the capacity to stream it, either because of Stadia servers are lacking or because internet bandwidth is lacking at any point along the way from the data center to you, then your experience is going to be horrendous. You're going to have huge pixelation, drops in frames, sound issues, what have you. So although this looks very promising, there are a lot of hurdles, not to mention technological hurdles, that need to be addressed, and internet speeds are not consistent and stable across the board everywhere. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to ring the bell before you leave to be notified of all future episodes as soon as they go live. And thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing, and we'll see you next time.